Konstantina. I'm delighted to have the chance to chat with you today as one of the leaders in IQVIA's Patient-centered Solutions team. In a moment, we're going to talk about the educational series on clinical outcome assessment analysis. But before we do that, could you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell me how you came to work in this field?
I'm also very happy to be speaking with you here in our London office, Mary. I'm a director in the Statistics and Psychometrics team in Patient-centered Solutions here in IQVIA. I started with a short period in academia with a PhD in biostatistics. After which I moved to the pharmaceutical industry in a small CRO company, and then transitioned to IQVIA 13 years ago. So in my first years in IQVIA, I was working in the market access and reimbursement space, where I first got in touch with the clinical outcome assessments before transitioning to what we now know as the Patient-centered Solutions team. In parallel, I also enjoy teaching in a couple of master programs in the University of Barcelona.
Okay, and so coming to your educational series, you've released a sequence of papers all under the title Defining and Analysing Patient-centric Endpoints based on COAs and Digital Technologies. Can you tell me a little about what you've done?
Yeah, with COAs becoming increasingly important, we felt that the industry needed a definitive text where we would be describing how statistical considerations should help inform COA strategies. So we put together 9 chapters that we think will appeal to both statisticians and non-statisticians. A couple of years ago, in 2023, our team developed the Patient Experience Data Book, where we were describing how to define COA objectives. And we took this thread and developed it further by describing the steps needed to develop a COA strategy and incorporating the statistical considerations throughout this process. So we said, you need to define your COA objectives, you need to translate those into endpoints, you need to define the estimates for those endpoints, and finally describe the statistical methods that align with those estimates and will essentially answer your objectives accurately. So in this process, we statisticians have an important role to play, and I hope this will come across in the book. Finally, we also took the opportunity in this series to describe some additional considerations, so some statistical considerations in a couple of emerging areas we are active in digital health technologies, producing intensive longitudinal data, so data collected very frequently, and in tolerability.
So I think anybody who's been working in the field of COAs for some time will have observed the growing interest and collection of COAs in clinical development. IQVIA's research has shown that over 80% of global phase 3 trials now collect at least one clinical outcome assessment. So industry is clearly embracing the importance of measuring the patient perspective. But my observation is that there's not always a clear strategy for the COA data and how it will ultimately be used. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so there are some therapeutic areas where COAs have form the basis of primary endpoints, for example, in CNS or psychiatry, in dermatology, and there things are quite established. But there are some other areas where COAs are not primary endpoints, but they may play a supportive role, and this is increasingly important. So, like in chronic diseases, in rare diseases, and also in oncology, right, where patients are treated with several lines of treatment for extended periods, and with different toxicity profiles. Therefore, characterizing the quality of life there is critical. So in these areas where COAs are more supportive, but increasingly important, we do notice that frequently the COA objectives are not well defined and usually serve a descriptive purpose. And it is our belief that COA objectives should be taken care of, right, like any other trial objective. So there are a couple of things that complicate matters with COAs in these areas. So usually COAs aim to measure many different aspects of the patient's quality of life. Therefore, we usually have a lot of items, they end up in a lot of domains, so that creates lots of options, right, for endpoints and analysis. And least but not last, scoring COAs can frequently go wrong.
Right. So then what are you trying to achieve or hoping to achieve with your educational series?
Right, so as I mentioned a minute ago, and I think it's clearly described in the series, the objectives, the endpoints in the analysis, right? I mean, this sequence needs to be well defined from the start. And when we say from the start, we mean from the moment that the study is being designed. So right now, the industry is not uniformly following this approach. And when this doesn't happen, three things may occur. There may be a lack of clear and meaningful objectives. Objectives and results presented may be misaligned. And in many instances, we have a lot of COA data collected, but the insights are incomplete. Therefore, considering the level of investment that is needed to implement and collect the COAs, it's clearly a missed opportunity and a low return on investment. So this sequence of objectives, endpoints, and analysis is described in our first 5 chapters of the educational series for traditional COAs, but we also wanted to convey very clearly that the principles set in those 5 chapters are applicable for whatever COA objective, and even if the COAs are collected through, for example, other ways like, I don't know, like passive sensors.
Another challenge for industry is that the COA evidence requirements can vary across different regulatory agencies and across different payers. We've observed that there is increasing influence of COA evidence in health technology assessments, but it's inconsistent across different agencies. So how can pharmaceutical companies plan for this?
Yeah, so pharmaceutical companies should first define their value messages and do that early, because that will define when to collect the data and how to set the analysis up. So they need to think of all stakeholders, therefore things need doing earlier. The problem is that different stakeholders may require different analysis for the same value story. And that's only going to be more important now with the joint clinical assessment process here in the EU. On the logistical side, you don't want to overburden your main study SAP with loads and loads of analysis. So one approach that we often recommend to sponsors, and it seems to be working quite well, is to develop a separate PRO SAP for each purpose with different timing, which will help alleviate the burden, and it will also accommodate different specialists coming in at the right stage.
Well, there's a lot of things to consider here for pharmaceutical companies. So is there a winning formula for doing this well?
Yeah, keeping up with so many developments is a demanding exercise, Mary, in this evolving space of patient-focused drug development, the PFDD initiatives by regulatory and payer agencies. Here in IQVIA, we are quite lucky to have a dedicated team of statisticians and psychometricians that work together to develop COA strategies. So our psychometricians, together with the digital experts, ensure that the right measure is in the trial, and work hand in hand with the statisticians to define endpoints and the right analytical methods to, that will demonstrate the product's value. together with strategy consultants, regulatory consultants, and COA scientists, we ensure that the COA strategies that we develop are both scientifically and statistically sound, but also meet regulatory and payer requirements. So you asked what the winning formula is. I think that having an interdisciplinary team together with good knowledge of the methods that we outlined in the educational series is probably the winning formula.
Great. Thank you, Konstantina. It's been great to talk to you today about that initiative.
Thank you very much, Mary.